We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email john@nufcmatters.com to arrange today.
Attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true. And it feels alright when they come and say to you,
good evening, welcome to NUFC Matters. It is the three amigos, the perfect way to kickstart your Newcastle United weekend, and I'm joined by George, Steve, and it's a welcome return to Ian Mearns. Good evening, Ian.
Good evening, nice to see you all.
Good to see you, mate. Neil Mitchell is joining us, Geordie Dentist. He's going to be in the room in about 2 minutes' time. Internet went off in his house, so he's just getting that sorted out, and he will be back with us. The joys of Middle Eastern internet. But as always, plenty to talk about. Don't forget as well, get your questions in the chat if you want to ask any of us a question. But as always, plenty to talk about. And John Askew, we'll give you your first question tonight. He's often in very early. He asked a couple of questions early on. He says, will the club have a couple lined up for signing in the first week or two of July? I think that's when we're allowed a bit more flexibility to spend our money. George, look, we're seeing lots of talk about PSR and Minty off to Everton and Dominic Calvert-Lewin again potentially coming to Newcastle, but we're not going to focus on those players as much as we have on previous shows this week. Just Newcastle, they haven't got a director of football, but they do have Amanda, Darren Eales, of course, Steve Nixon, and Eddie's nephew, heading up the transfer negotiations. I would imagine that they're going to get things done. There's been lots of talk, but no action other than Kelly coming in. But I would imagine things will start to hot up once that deadline of the 30th of June passes over, George.
Well, it's the way of the work, isn't it? I mean, yes, we haven't got a director of football. I would question if we ever had a director of football, to be honest. Never mind. Look at the history. The history is everybody's guessing this one, that one, 160 odd on the list last year or something before we signed anybody or so forth. And then suddenly out of the atmosphere, and the year before, out of the atmosphere come people like Bruno and Isaac and Botman. And I mean, some of these people I had never heard of, and yet for months apparently they had been courting these players before they came to St James's Park. And I can't imagine for 1 minute that that's not going on now. I'd be amazed if it's not. And there's also all the things that you hear whispers of. It's happening in the Euros. Players that they've spotted there that they've got an interest in, and suddenly discover, well, didn't even know they had an interest in him. Yet he's credited. There's a centre forward, I think, from is it Slovenia or somewhere like that, and suddenly we're on the list of clubs that want to buy him. So I'd be amazed if they're not doing something at this moment in time, ready for the early in the transfer window, and for the rest of the transfer window. Plus, the other bit they'll be doing, I'm quite certain, is finding out how to get rid of some of the deadwood we've got. because that's an important feature as well. So, I'm sure all that will be going on in the background at this moment. I'd be very disappointed if it wasn't. Now, I'm sure it will be, yes, Steve. Sure it will be.
Yeah, Ian, you're nodding away there, and I think we'll probably all agree. Newcastle, do know what they're doing. They are well organised as far as doing business is concerned. They've got to obey the laws, the rules. Otherwise, the authorities will come down on us like the proverbial ton of bricks. But yeah, do you expect some announcements come 1st of July, 2nd of July?
Well, I'd love to think so. I mean, I think though we shouldn't forget, last season was so blighted by injuries that effectively we're going to have some players back from injury or from suspension that'll be like new signings almost as well. And I'm not saying we should rest on our laurels at all, but at the same time, I'm not really sure why I would be swapping the likes of Minty for Calvert-Lewin either. But let's hope that they've actually got the right players lined up. To bring in some fresh blood and just freshen the squad up. I'm quite hopeful for this season. I've for years and years, the Ashley regime kind of knocked a lot of the optimism out of me. But I'm quite optimistic about this next year. I think particularly since we didn't qualify for European football, I actually regard that possibly as a bit of a plus in terms of where we might finish up in the top 4.
Yeah, Mitch, good evening, mate. Got your internet sorted. That's the beauty of Middle East internet. But you're back. We're just talking about the potential transfer incomings after the 30th of June. John Askew was just asking, do you think Newcastle will have something lined up for then?
Don't know. I mean, the whole situation we've got at the minute. Everybody's now got themselves stressed about this PSR deadline up to the end of June, and then going forward, what we're going to do after that. And there's kind of two sides to the answer, isn't there, really? I think the first one, I would like to give a little bit of an alternative view to what people have been bouncing around. And this is genuinely a personal opinion, not based on anything that I claim to know. I would be amazed, given the people in control of the budget and the individual that I believe controls the budget from the PIF side for Newcastle United, that we are sailing close to the wind on PSR with a few days to go to the end of a period and we're scrambling to sell a player. If that's the case, that's actually gross negligence, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. It's terrible management, and those responsible for it want kicked up the arse. Who is making these claims at the moment? Well, it's everybody with skin in the game. We've heard nothing, zero, zilch from Newcastle United. Nothing. And who has access to those books? Well, certainly not the journalists, who would love PIF to fail. I think there's even some of our own journalists who still carry such political leanings that they would like to write a story saying that Saudi has failed. There's people like us, gobshites on the internet. Let's pick out the SLBN. I don't know how you pronounce it. The Twitter account. The guys obviously works in finance and accounting. He's got skin in the game. He's a Man City fan. He'd love Newcastle United to fail. So he's going off of what he has access to, which is the same as what everybody else has access to, which is nothing. Public figures, public numbers. He doesn't have any access to anything, secret squirrel. Doesn't know 100% what is fact. He makes a lot of good arguments and a lot of interesting assumptions, but that's all they are. And even if we are trying to wheel and deal up to the end of this period, nobody's made the argument, are we looking to get into a profitable situation by the end of this accounting period? Because wouldn't that make the next accounting period and the next transfer window even easier for us? So of course we'd be interested in dealing up to the end of the transfer period, up to the end of the accounting period, because if that puts us in an even better position for the following transfer window, It would be daft not to continue to trade up to that point. And nobody's putting this forward. The journalists don't want to write anything positive about it. People talking about it and from other spheres don't want it to be because they've all got interest in other clubs and everybody's desperate to see Saudi fail. And I say it again, I think for us to be sailing that close to the wind, if we genuinely are, I'm more than disappointed. More than disappointed. This is nothing we can blame Ashley on. Like we said, honeymoon period ended a long time ago. This is their club, their watch, their responsibility. And knowing what I know about the way people in the Middle East do business, having been out here over a decade now, one thing's for sure, if there's something to draw a line and toe a line with, they will respect that and do the very best they can to be fully prepared and fully aware of when those deadlines are. If there are legal loopholes to be pursued, they will pursue them. They will not take the piss, however, because again, I'll say this again, we step out the line, we put our heads above the parapet 1 inch too far. The Red Cartel will be jumping around with the Premier League going, say, we told you so. These were going to go in and do all these horrible things in football, while American money takes the piss. Well, we've got shirt front sponsors who don't exist. Let's call it for what it is. I'm tired of beating around the bush. Wolves and Crystal Palace's shirt front sponsors do not exist. If they did, why is the picture on the website of one of them, a Chinese TikToker who's been dead for 3 years, as the CEO of one of the bloody betting companies? It's BS. It's BS big time. Why is that being allowed to go through? Why have Chelsea been allowed to do? Well, again, they say they have. Nobody from the Premier League has come out and said they've ratified hotel sales and stuff like that to make the books balance. It's just the same people saying that it's fine and it's okay and there's nothing to see here and here's a squirrel and look at the shiny keys. They've got a shirt front sponsor who are sponsoring the club to the tune of 20 times their annual turnover. How does that get ratified? That's nonsense. That's beyond nonsense. And we're all stressing about an accounting period. And because somebody who goes on the radio a lot tells me that we're flying close to the wind and we're going to fail. Because journalists tell me that we're flying close to the wind and they're going to fail. We're not privy to anything. I'm not privy to anything. They aren't either. And so I'm quite happy to sit back and relax and just let the show unfold. Let's see where we're at once these periods are out of the way. However, I'll say it yet again, if they've screwed this up, heads need to roll. And that's probably totally the worst phrase I could have just used at that point. But people know what I mean.
They do.
Take your hands off for that sort of opinion, mate.
Steve, when you're last on this forum, sometimes it sometimes leaves you with nothing to say. But Steve, I know you will always have something to say with regards to these issues. So over to you, Steve.
I was just going to stand up and salute. That's all. I mean, we've had part of this conversation over the last few days with Mitch and myself, because obviously I've been out here and we've had a couple of get-togethers. But it's absolutely spot on in what he says. Going back to the question, however, which was about the 1st of July and whether we'll have somebody lined up. Yes, we'll have people lined up, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll come waltzing through the door on the 1st of July. I think everybody also needs to remember that it's usually the 31st of August or the 1st of September or the last 12 hours before the transfer deadline ends, before all the main business is done. And we did say on this show a couple of months ago now, well, probably 6 weeks ago, and I think we all agreed who were on the show at the time that was probably nothing really major was going to happen in the transfer window, or up to the end of the Euros. You know, the Euros has taken priority. It's taken priority with the quality players. I think clubs will be watching the Euros in terms of who's available, that type of thing. But I don't think we're going to get players, if they are of international quality, moving at any time during the Euros. I remember sitting in front with Mitch, with Derek Lambias, where he talked about the transfer window, if you like, and how Newcastle United operated. And I don't think it'll have changed, because what he actually said was something that was quite sound, which was every football club worked on a 3-year cycle, a six cycle transfer window, and it was constantly moving forward. And what he meant by that was you had a list of players that you were watching, a list of players that you were interested in, and a list of players that you desperately wanted to bring in during that window, and everyone moved forward. So you had it was almost like your old probables and possibles, and then your definites sitting in front of that. And within that also there was various layers of, if, for example, a player that you went for at the top end wasn't available, you moved to plan B and you moved to plan C. But always at the bottom, you had the club had a watch and brief, and it changed as players' forms dipped. It changed through injuries. It changed through all sorts of different circumstances within the club, and also with changes of management personnel. I think Newcastle are now sitting in a bit of a hiatus point, because we haven't got a director of football, and I think that title might even change to a sporting director once the whole situation with Ashworth gets wrapped up and the club starts to move forward on that respect. Yes, Amanda is the one who's doing the transfer activity, if you like, or is the face of the football club in terms of talking to other clubs, certainly in the UK and beyond. But I don't think that's really changed. I think she was always had that position. You just have to look at the excitement that was generated on the club film when we signed Anthony Gordon, and her words were, this is someone we've been watching for a while. I love the player. It's somebody who I really want. And then not only that, but that has carried on. You listen to her subsequently to that film that was put out by the club last season. So you saw then that she was heavily involved in the Anthony Gordon one, more than possibly involved in others. So I think the club's probably in a good position going forward. I think we've just got to get over this little hitch, if you like, or little bump in the road that everybody is covering at the moment, which is the profit and sustainability rules situation. And I think Mitch is dead right. Nobody knows. Everyone's speculating, but nobody knows for definite. And I did put it on social media earlier this week, excuse me, when I was having a conversation with a number of people. And I said, nobody's privy to the accounts. The accounts haven't come out yet. There's nobody who's privy to the day-to-day running of the day-to-day bank account or has any idea of what's going on. Probably even the financial director isn't as clued up as that. So we just need to step back, and people are speculating for whatever reason, probably because it's entertainment. And that's the nature, I suppose, of social media now in football. As we go forward, we used to speculate in the pub round the table on a Friday night. Now we speculate 24/7 on social media.
And some simply because it's Newcastle United, Steve.
Absolutely, George. Absolutely.
Because it's clicks and views. That's the problem. Yeah. Let's change tact a little bit. Ray, good evening, mate. Thanks for your donation as always. He goes, are expectations and pressure raised for Eddie next season, given that we've got no Europe, George?
Yes, of course they are. Ian's just said it. I'm excited about next year. And one of the reasons I'm very excited is if there's no midweek Europe games and all the things that go with that, then we really have no excuse for not having a shot at all the domestic stuff. The league, the two cups that are worth going at. We should be in the vanguard for that this year. If we get all the players back who've been injured and the one that's been suspended for 10 months and they're all on song, there's no reason why we shouldn't be making a hole in all of that. And I agree with Ian, top 4 should be minimum we should expect without the encumbrance of the European adventure. So yes, I think that does place more pressure on, more demand on Eddie Howe. I'm not sure he's as pressurised as at anything really. He seems calm as a cucumber, but he will have it in his mind that if by Christmas, I'd say that if by Christmas it doesn't look like we're going to do anything in the domestic things, he will have pressure because, as Dean just said, The people who own the place aren't people who play for fun. They like to win. They want to be the best. That's why they're here. And that will certainly give Eddie some pressure. But Ian's absolutely right. Without the encumbrance of the European adventure, what's to stop we're having a real go at the domestic trophies, league and 2 cups at least, and anything else that happens to come around. So yes, the short answer to the question is yes. I do think it will place demands on him, but it's not demands he shouldn't be accustomed to, because he's demonstrated in the 2 seasons since the takeover happened, he's capable of producing a team that does fantastic things, both in defence and attack. And if he can produce that again, sky's the limit domestically, in my view.
Yeah. I mean, I would add to that, Stevie. Sorry, I would add to that, Stevie, that you know, I've had a look at the fixture list, and there doesn't seem to be like a sustained bad run potential, you know, banana skin, the way in which the fixtures are panning out. I mean, you know, the games that you would think, well, which are going to be challenging for us, or should be challenging for us, you know, seem to be interspersed across the season. I think where we let ourselves down across last season was the points that were dropped against the so-called lower sides. I know there's no easy games in the Premier League, but we did drop points against sides down the league. Nottingham Forest at home, Luton Town away come to mind immediately. But there we go. And let's not forget. You know, obviously, the way in which the season pans out will have a lot to do with how other teams are actually performing in Europe, and so that will actually have an impact on when we actually have to play our games, whether it be Sunday nights or Monday nights or whatever it is. You know.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think as well, Mitch, the other side of it for Eddie Howe is if he doesn't qualify for Europe next season, then there could be a bit of an issue for him then. You know, it's all ifs and buts, and you know, next season he's got a bit of an opportunity to almost, you know, regain that kind of run that we went on and getting into the Champions League. But I agree with your dad. I agree with Ian. You know, we've really got to give those cups a go again, and hopefully get a bit of luck in the draws next year.
Yeah. And he doesn't have anywhere to hide.
No.
There's no real place you can excuse yourself. You can't say, oh, well, we've got the added weight of the Champions League. You can't say, well, we're stretched here or we're stretched there. I would hope we don't have a ridiculous run of injuries. You know, I mean, it was getting to the point of, you know, all we needed was an outbreak of Ebola at the training ground to tick all the boxes for mysterious illnesses and injuries that people went down with. And without all of that, there's absolutely nowhere to hide. And with nowhere to hide,
there's been an outbreak of necrotizing fasciitis at Sunderland, I understand, but there we go.
Is that what was in them pink slices he was handing out?
Quite possibly.
Jackie White's Market.
I have to say I like their new strip because it's the arrows down the sleeve point which direction they're going in.
It's cracking. One thing I say, it'll never be seen on sale in Dubai Mall.
No.
Yeah, always one step behind. He doesn't have anywhere to hide, so that brings very different set of pressure. I think, very admittedly, I think fans are excited at the prospect of giving it a damn good go again next season. And so I think it's a very different set of circumstances as he had going into last season. At the start of last season, the Champions League was a grand adventure with nothing to lose, and everybody told how badly we'd get beat everywhere, and we were probably 22 minutes away from actually going through the knockout stages. That's how ridiculous it was. But how ridiculously well we did.
I mean, Mitch, on that, by the way, and people forget, you know, the two of the teams in our group were semi-finalists in the Champions League.
Yes.
You know, that's where we were. Two semi-finalists in the Champions League were in our group, you know.
Very easily forgotten. Yeah. And some of those places like Villa who took the mick and people whinging at places like Man United saying, "Oh well, they've ruined the coefficient." Okay, let's see how you do this season. Crack on, lads. It's a different ball game, and that different ball game means it's different circumstances for Eddie next season. I think because there's certain things now he will do that you can't say, "Oh well, he's overachieved there." Now as well, he doesn't have that to fall back on either. Now we'll have to see the colour of his the whites of his eyes and see what he can bring to the table.
Yep, Steve, Eddie's got a big job ahead in the next 9 months, but he's had a big job ahead, since he got here. He kept us up when it looked impossible at times. He then gets us into the Champions League when all we were expecting was to finish in 10th position. And then, last season, against all the odds, with the most horrific injury list that I think any of us can remember, we're now in a position where, ultimately, we finished just short of Europe. I mean, he's done remarkable things in our first, set of, seasons that he's been in charge. Will he do it again?
He has to do it again. That's the problem, because he's done so well in the first 2 seasons. The pressure is really on him, especially with us not being in Europe. And I think that third season is the season where the owners are going to be saying, "Oh, am I seeing the improvement?" I can dispel some of the things that happened because of the injury run, and he did okay, but ultimately we didn't qualify for Europe. This season, there's no distractions. And I think their expectations will have been raised as well. The only thing that didn't seem to get raised was the expectation of the fans. Now, whether that was just an extended honeymoon for Eddie Howe, I'm not too sure. There were 1 or 2 rumblings, if we remember, around about February, March. But that fire was mainly put out because of the injury, and let's face it, he had plenty credit in the bank. I just wonder whether this season he will have the same amount of credit, both among the fan base and, more importantly, in the boardroom, because we need to be in a position by the end of next season where we're back in Europe. We need that income generation that European football brings, and I think that's the added pressure. We talk about profit and sustainability rules this season, whether there is or isn't an issue, but next season that could well be, if the European situation doesn't materialise, if the sponsors aren't happy, if, for example, the commercial department isn't working its socks off to bring in the commercial deals that we need. Now, to get those commercial deals, we've got to be successful on the pitch. So it's like a cat chasing its tail at the moment. There's a lot of goodwill floating around from everywhere. And I mean, Adidas will be expecting us to do really well because they're pumping an awful lot of money in, and they'll want a return on their so-called investment in the face of sponsorship. So I think there's pressure all around, Steve. And something that Ian covered there when we're talking about the fact that the 2 teams got into the semi-final. Absolutely, that shows you how well we were. And I mean, not only that, Ian, but what people forget, we're a matter of minutes away from being in the next rounds as well. Yeah. Robbed by a refereeing decision, a blatant penalty, and then not being given, and then the situation that was given. All we can say about the European games is that the only team really that turned us over both times was the team that got the final. And they were very, very unlucky in the final, that first 60 minutes as well. So, that's always at the back of my mind that, but maybe as a Newcastle fan, I'm sitting here going, yeah, well, that's always the way I've always been. The ifs are this and the buts. What if Roy Keane hadn't have done this against, what if Anelka hadn't played in the cup final, and so it goes on. There's so much. We've been so close, but so far. But I think this is where eventually the pressure will tell with Eddie Howe, and it will be the boardroom.
I mean, I think on that, Steve, I mean, in reflection on last season as well, I mean, I think the big difference between last season and the previous season to that was actually the goals against column. And, and I just don't blame the defence on its own for that. But I mean, it was the fact that we were so threadbare when it came to the whole squad for large parts of the season. And there were games where they were running on empty. So the goals against column suffered, I think, because of that. But also, in particular, we had midfielders who could go box to box on a regular basis throughout the previous season. But in last season, it was quite clear that there were players running on empty for many parts of many games, and that did hurt us. I mean, I'm just trying to think about some of the players that will be coming back, and hopefully we'll have them for the bulk of the season that we haven't had over the last season. Obviously, Tonali's one of them. Botman is a big one. Joe Linton we missed for large parts of last season. Nick Pope we missed for large parts of last season. And at the end of the season, we lost Miley. And on top of that, Wilson was in and out of injuries as well. So I think we've got to be cognizant of all of that before we start pressing the button on incoming signings as well. I mean, I'm not convinced that we should be signing players that we know have got a dubious track record over injuries. I mean, we don't need more sick notes.
No, definitely
and when
not.
you talk about box to box, when you talk about box to box, let's not forget Joe Willock as well. I mean, there was a player who was playing out of his skin before, and he was literally out for almost the entire season. And look at the problems we had at fullback. We had fullbacks coming in like Livramento, who then gets injured. We didn't see Lewis Howe. We didn't see the best of him. We had Trippier out, and so it goes on and on. And what you've got to hope is that the squad's stronger than it was, and able to sustain those injuries. Sustain the issue when we get injuries. Are we relying on a Paul Dummett and that type of thing? Paul's not there anymore, but who's going to take his mantle? Are we talking about someone that would actually bring in immediately rather than wait and ends up with 3 appearances? We had a situation as well where we had Matt Ritchie coming on at certain times in games, and you're thinking, well, I'm hoping that we've got something bigger, because what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at players that were there all the way through the Mike Ashley reign almost, had 7 and 8 years, and this is where the change hadn't happened. And I think this is probably an area where other people have criticised Eddie Howe, certainly among the fan base, where there's a level of criticism, which is, does he trust players for too long? Does he have a loyalty to players for too long? Has he got the ruthlessness to get rid? And the only thing I've seen of Eddie in terms of ruthlessness was Ryan Fraser, who we never ever found out why he was pushed out the door, but boy was he kicked and sent down across that Tyne bridge. In fact, he must have flown past your house. Yes, he was on his way back down the south coast.
I did actually see him.
You know what I mean?
He was carrying a big flag saying "South Coast, here I come." It's
good stuff. Okay, you're watching the 3 Amigos on NUFC Matters. As always, we've got plenty to get through. Big thanks to everybody who gives us a shout out in the comments on the videos and on our Facebook group and Facebook page. You can like or join either one of them. Just search NUFC Matters. Stuart was one of those who left a comment on YouTube. He says, "First time I've come across your channel. What a sensible and common sense guy you are." He was talking about you, Mitch. This was a welcome change from the typical rage bait, outrage, reactionary culture that largely exists on socials, and why I'm not on most of them anymore and rarely watch football content outside of games. You've got yourself a new sub, he says. DCL links were surprising, but fully behind the club. The DCL playing for Newcastle under Eddie Howe, with players providing service and quality behind him in Bruno and Tonali, with players like Gordon and a new right winger alongside him, occupying space and dragging men off him, will be a totally different DCL than the one we've seen at Everton. So bit of support there from Stuart Pirry, so thank you for that. We also had this one from David Cook on Facebook. He says, "Hard to believe it's over 2 years since I found NUFC Matters community, the best Newcastle United community going, keeping us well informed and balanced with Steve, Keith, Steve and Mitch and their historical phenomena that is George Mitchell." Thank you very much, David Cook. It's been a pleasure having you on the channel and your regular input in the chat. And Jim, he said, this one's for George Mitchell. He says, you yearn for those back in the day kind of events. He says, you pick up the Newcastle Journal and Joe Harvey had signed a young kid from Bury. Aye, Bury. He'd scored 8 goals in 90 appearances. No social media, no meltdown. Terry Mack. The transfer gurus out there know better, though. Just a little response to the good old days when we didn't have social media, George, and signings were made, and we just got on with it and went to the match. And
he's been watching too many of those other days.
He has. Go on, Ian.
That reminds me of a story. I bumped into Mark McGee quite a few years ago at Warwick University. The team he was managing them, and I can't remember who it was, were actually playing Coventry the next day, and they were staying at Warwick University campus. And you talk about like remembering players that were transferred in previous times. Mark McGee couldn't even remember the other Scottish player that was signed on the same day as him by Bill McGarry. And that was Mike Lannock. Remember Mike Lannock? Whatever happened to him?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Good stuff. Yeah, we've got Mark McGee. Did better the second time round.
He did, Well, he did better than Mike Lannock.
He was probably managing Reading at the time.
Aye. Final one was from Stephen Kent. Says, finally a look into Mitch's bedroom. Is this your bedroom, Mitch? What's your thoughts on this bed? He says, Mitch, that's the dream bed.
There's too much fruit juice.
Exactly. too many vitamins in there.
All right. As always, plenty to get through. Here's a little bit of this. Albert was back with a vengeance after Keith's appearance last week. Keith asked for some hair, so we give him some. So not quite a lookalike, but I always feel that's probably the best place to put Albert's pieces.
Can I declare an interest on that one, Stevie? Albert Mooney was in the same year as me at school.
Was he? Oh, you could dish the dirt on Albert. Oh, good stuff. Paparazzi, 2 lookalikes. Joe Biden, he says, spot the mask cartel. Yeah, mate. That's I've never seen as many on one thing there, Paparazzi, but thank you for that. This one from 100% Mags, who loves Toon Lookalike, it has to be said. Actor Alec Baldwin and Romanian manager Edward Lodanescu. What do you think of that one, lads?
He's not carrying a gun.
Yes, guy. Yeah, go. I forgot about that. I'm going to load another one because we did have a late. Oh, it is. It's not bad. Good, a lookalike from Billy. He says Bob Geldof or Steve Hasty. That's better than a dog.
Yeah,
we've had this so many times, but David stuck this one in because of the impending mask that he had to have on. Leonardo the Turtle and Mbappe at the Euros, and Grange Hill won. Piers Morgan and Trisha Years from Grange Hill.
Very good.
Sort of. And 100% Mags put this one as well. Mike Vidar, a.k.a. Luis Mendoza from the Mighty Ducks movie, and Miggy Almiron. Not bad. Not bad again. And this one, J.K. Rowling and the Lady of the Conjuring. Yeah, but didn't really hit approval. Alan McKenzie, Steve Hasty. That's noodles, Steve. I don't think you've ever been compared to noodles.
I know. I've seen the video. It's very good. I've also seen the video of Mbappe when he gets a huge, big Dior box and he opens it up and it's a gift from the players in the French squad or the PSG squad. And he opens it up and it's a Ninja Turtles mask. I don't know whether you've seen that one.
I've seen that one, yeah. Keeping it topical, Bet Midler and Bet Fiddler.
That's funny. That's as funny as it is good. That.
And the winner this week is this one. Late entry from Rich Story. Brilliant, that, Rich. Thank you very much for that. Great stuff. Could have had Colaccini in there as well, Mitch. You sent me that.
Yeah. Easily. Yeah.
Excellent stuff. If you've got a lookalike, you send it to me at Steve Wraith on X or go to our Facebook group or page.
I've seen that hairstyle advertised in the barbers that I go to. It's called Explosion in a Mattress Factory.
Combing your hair with a firework. Good stuff. That's Toon Lookalike for this. All right, quick question for Ian from Tom Dixon. Good evening, Tom. He says, do you think Gateshead will move stadiums, mate? There was a little bit in the press about it, potentially that they could move.
Well, I mean, I think anything's possible. I mean, you know, look, I've got an awful lot of sympathy for the local authorities' position, given how much money's been sucked out from their budget. But unfortunately, that's left Gateshead in a dreadful position. Gateshead Football Club. You know, I go and watch Gateshead when I can, and you know, been to Wembley to see them a couple of times, and you know, I think it's just terribly sad. What there was actually, you know, it's about now 16 years ago when there was a very good likelihood that they were going to move to the North Durham site opposite the Civic Centre, but then the credit crunch hit, and the business plan that they had, you know, in terms of renting out space within that new stadium development, just folded. You know, the business plan folded overnight with the 2008 credit crunch. So, you know, and ever since then have been kind of up and down. I mean, I think that Gateshead Stadium is an athletics track. I don't like watching football there, but I've had to endure it on many dozens of occasions to go and watch Gateshead. But I don't like doing so. But at the same time, you know, it's the best thing that we've got. I mean, it's certainly league standard, but the trouble is, you know, the running costs of the stadium are just horrendous, and I don't think if for instance, if Gateshead were to try and take on the stadium, the running costs themselves would probably be more than the club bring in on an annual basis.
Well, for the council, Ian, one of the big costs will be maintaining that tartan track. Yeah. Because if they don't maintain it, they won't get all the big events.
Well, but also on top of that, you see, I mean, that one of the factors within that is that the local authority, for instance, with floodlighting, etc., has had grants from different sporting bodies. And if they do have to close the stadium, a lot of those grant payments will have to be repaid back to those sporting bodies. Yeah. So, you know, I mean, the big problem has been, and I'm afraid to say I forecast that this would happen back in the autumn. I told people at the council that if Gateshead didn't have a 10-year lease, that they wouldn't be allowed in the league. And of course, the council got round that by saying, well, you know, we'll try and negotiate with the EFL if and when Gateshead qualify to be promoted. It doesn't work like that. They wouldn't even be allowed to take part in the playoffs because they hadn't got a 10-year lease at that stage. And that's what precluded Gateshead from even taking part in the playoffs this season. Terribly sad, and I was very, very upset about it. You know, very.
Ian, can I ask you a hypothetical?
Yeah.
If somebody was to come along and take Gateshead off the current owner's hands and had an absolute plan that part of their going forward was to keep the team in Gateshead and build something somewhere else that Gateshead can manage, Gateshead can cope with their budget, etc. Do you think the council would be very favourable when it comes to planning permissions and things like that?
I think, Mitch, it would literally all depend upon which site where, you know, it would. But I mean, you know, despite everything that's happened, I still think there is an awful lot of goodwill towards the football club from within the local authority. You know, look, I don't want to go on about too much about local government finance, but you know, the way in which local government finances worked, you know, meant that like 15 years ago, when I was deputy leader of the council, the local authority had then an annual revenue budget of about £310 million. Now, 15 years have gone down the line. Demand for particular services like adult social care and children's social care have gone up through the roof. And yet, in this year, Gateshead Council's budget's only £250 million. So in real terms, the council, in real terms, only has about half of what it had 15 years ago. And that means, you know, when it comes to spending revenue on sustaining things like leisure centres and stadiums, swimming pools, etc., just there's so much demand now on things like adult social care that, you know, that money just doesn't exist because they're statutory duties.
Steve, did you want to make a point?
I was just going to ask: is the situation going to arise next season then? because obviously the council can't give them the 10-year commitment that they need. Guess the council are currently trying to bring in new people to run the leisure centre or the stadium on their behalf, who may or may not be conducive. I'm sure that the council would be conducive to supporting the football club in that way. But if that wasn't to happen, our Gateshead always going to find themselves in the position where they'll never ever be able to get into the playoffs or be promoted.
Well, I think all sides in this discussion should learn from the experience. Let's actually learn from that experience and prevent it from ever happening again. And if the council does dispose of the asset to somebody else and tries to get them to run it as a viable thing, unfortunately, I can't see that happening without significant investment. And also an understanding that, what the council have been charging Gateshead in terms of rent has not been an economic rent. It's been a subsidised rent for quite some time. So, it's all very difficult. But sadly, it's all been brought about because the government haven't reformed the local government financing system, and revenue support grant has been sucked out of local authorities all over the country. And that's why councils like Birmingham, Nottingham, etc. are on the verge of declaring bankruptcy, because literally that the sums don't add up anymore.
Sad state of affairs, but hopefully Gateshead get some kind of come up with some kind of solution. And because we'd love to see them progress. Great club, great people, and great to see Rob Elliott doing so well down there.
Well,
awarded with a new contract.
And fantastic, by the way, winning the FA Trophy. It just shows you, a great feather in the cap for the club.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, let's get back to other football matters, and just a couple of things. Tom Dixon's put this out quite rightly. Not going to dwell too much on it. Maybe keep it for the professionals at 4:00 tomorrow. Newcastle and Leo Vegas group have signed a new agreement that will extend the club's thriving commercial partnership with leading sports betting brand BetMGM, which is good news. More money in the pot. And Newcastle announced a pre-season fixture. We have been speaking about the lack of announcements. We've got one today. They're going to take on Hull City in a pre-season friendly at the MKM Stadium on Saturday, 27th of July. Kick off at 2:00. Okay, let's go on in international matters. George, John Askew says, question for all the amigos on tonight. Are you really bothered about England's progress? For me, the Mags and England are like chalk and cheese. It's only a view. And we'll chuck in this as well while we're talking about England. Mark Byers, good evening or good afternoon to you. He says, Southgate rumoured to be making only one change. Manu for Gallagher. Does he never learn? Bloke would wear a hard hat and steel toe caps in circles in a child's soft play area. Yeah, I mean, England, are you that bothered? Are you that bothered, George? And that if that is the only change, he's keeping it the same as he did in the group game.
Well, there's two bothers you're asking us about. Am I bothered that England does well? Of course I am. The national side doing well always has a big throwback on what happens here at home. The impact of us winning the World Cup in '66 was immense in all sorts of ways.
Under a Labour government.
Well, exactly. In the year I got married as well. So, something went right. It does matter to me. I'm not going to beat the patriotic drum. That it's just about the impact it has on football generally. That you get an extra little star on the badge and all that sort of thing. Well, that all matters to me. It doesn't seem to matter very much to Southgate, though. Anybody who watched that game the other night and seen the impact that Anthony Gordon and the lad from Chelsea had on the game in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
They had more impact in 5 minutes than the other lot did for the whole of 85 minutes. 3 passes between them, and we could have been 2 or 3 goals in the lead in the last couple of minutes, directly from Anthony Gordon and is it Carlton from Chelsea? And they're just different class, and yet he has them shining their backsides on the substitutes bench for 2.5, well, nearly 3 whole games.
Yeah.
Well, what's he seeing in training that we haven't seen? And the other side of it is I went over this with the other night. That is, why is it that the centre half that's playing for Manchester City who's more like sometimes like a centre forward at times, why is he suddenly going to his shell and he gets the halfway line and runs backwards again, breaking to go forward like he does for Manchester City? All of these things need answered. But every time you think about answering, there's only one answer comes up: Gareth Southgate. Gareth, he must be the person that's telling them to play like this. Can't be anybody else, surely. And if that's true, then it's just tragic. Yes, they're through. And people are saying, well, they're through the top of the group. Yeah, I know that. That's smashing. But I want to see them playing some football, not just hanging on like grim death to get the point or whatever they need. No, it does bother us. And if that's true about the change, I like the lad that's coming on. He showed the other night that he's talented and capable of doing great things. I'm dismayed that Conor Gallagher's actually in the squad, to be perfectly honest. That's got to be pressure from London clubs to get him in the squad. Chelsea ruined that kid, in my view. And he as soon as he comes on, the first thing I think to myself is, how long will it be before he gets booked? And the other night it was only 6 minutes, and he was in the referee's book because he stretches too far. He's trying too hard instead of getting it in there that he wants to settle things down. Now the lad that's coming in his place is exactly the opposite. He has got it in there and he has got the football skill. So that bit I like. But what's going on around them and what's happening to some of the two lads, Gordon and the other lad from Chelsea.
Cole Palmer.
The two of the fastest players in the Premiership. Between them got more assists than any other two flankers in the Premiership, and as many goals between them as any other flankers in the Premiership. And yet they're sitting warming their bums on the sidelines. Now, he really needs to wobble his head a little bit. It's not been good. It's not been good. So yes, it does matter. As you can see, I'm going on a bit now.
Ian, I think that sums it up. He's playing all the right players, not necessarily in the right positions.
Well, I mean, I think that he's obviously got a major failing from my perspective. He's too conservative, so that's an obvious feeling, right? And I saw somebody on Twitter today said, the England players won't be voting in the general election because they can't even find the box, never mind put a cross in it. So it's.
What about you? Where do you stand? Where do you stand on it, Ian? Are you? I mean, obviously Newcastle first and foremost.
I'm Newcastle first and foremost, and I'm afraid to say years and years of experience have stopped me from getting excited about watching the national team. I kind of like tune in a bit, but I don't go over the top, supporting them. And I have to say, I haven't been to a couple of international matches as well, watching England. I'm afraid to say that I find it very difficult to relate to an awful lot of the England fan base.
Yeah. Mitch, views on England and the current performance. If he is going to go for one change, it's a bit strange. Well,
based off that picture you just showed, Southgate's not bringing me any sunshine, that's for sure. I've said before, I have this bizarre love-hate relationship with England. I always say I'm never going to get excited ahead of the tournament, and always do. And principally because every time Newcastle used to get a player close to England, it would be time to sell him and move him on. Yeah. So you didn't want that success. Ironically, see a couple of dickheads in the press linking Gordon with Liverpool today. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're quiet about his position. Well, the position is he's a Newcastle player. Now do one. Get fucked. Anyway, what Southgate's doing, I just don't know. I don't know whether he's watched any football. I still go back to that comment about Calvin Phillips. I've never really replaced Calvin Phillips. What, the man that all the West Ham fans I know out here used to dread walking on the pitch in that shirt because he was just a one-man disaster area.
Yeah.
I don't understand the reason why sticking to his guns so firmly, taking only one left-footed fullback to that tournament, and knowing he was not fit is a disastrous decision, and then some. It makes no sense whatsoever to me. And yet, of course, I want England to do well. You know, if anybody's listened to what my dad said on various podcasts, my football upbringing, very much like his, and influences like one of my earliest football memories is racing down Chicken Road from school with my great uncle Tom to get to his house in time for England-France in Spain 82 to kick off. You know, I was brought up on understanding how amazing the international game could be. I remember my granddad teaching us European geography by telling us, starting with, this is where all the teams in black and white play, and then take it from there. You know, these are things that are for me and my dad's family, that this is how we roll and how it always was. I had a very unusual love with French football, having been to France in '84 for the European Cup and saw a couple of games there, and then suddenly immersed in this world of Saint Etienne and Bordeaux and odd-coloured strips and different and chevrons, and you know, it still, yeah, when we're getting excited talking about it now. So of course, I want to get excited about England doing well in Europe and European football. But by God, what me and Steve and a couple of other lads out here, Steve Bennett and Chris, sat through on the other night was turgid. Dreadful. And I think that's doing turgid a disservice. It was 70-odd% possession. But what did we do with it? Absolutely nout. And yet you've got, and somebody made this point about Gordon. He came on so late, but what was the first thing he did? Knocked the ball past the fullback and pinned his ears back. And yes, he ran out to play. But from that moment on, that fullback was never going forward again. So why wasn't he on the pitch at an hour? Because that fullback would have gone nowhere, knowing that's what he was up against for the last half hour of the game. Yeah. And if you know what, if I can see that, I don't profess to be, you know, a master tactician in the world of football. It's just basic. It's just basic, and he can't even seem to get the basics right. And now he just looks like a man who's scrambling to cover his own arse all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve, the England games, they've been like watching paint dry. It's created lots of memes and lots of JPEGs anyway for people.
Absolutely. The highlight of Tuesday night was when the chips arrived. And we all cheered when the girl brought us 2 huge big plates of chips. So that was the most exciting thing that happened. I mean, our viewing was through, how would you describe it, Mitch? A satellite dish that sometimes
it was through a dodgy Indian satellite system. Yes, a dodgy Indian satellite system with not so much a delay as it. Could you imagine trying to watch a football game through 80s internet download? Yeah. It was like that, and it was pixelated.
There was one point where
bit like watching World Soccer on an Atari.
There was one point where I turned around and said, "This game's on this TV has stopped that many times and paused that I reckon we must only be in like that 20 minutes to go," and then the referee blew for half time. So you can imagine we were all missing bits of it, and we lost the will to live at that point. And I think having read the reports, I think the rest of our country had lost the will to live as well, to be perfectly honest. So we actually didn't miss anything. It reminded me, Mitch mentioned 82. Yeah, we go back to 82. Ron Greenwood took 2 injured players in Brooken and Keegan, and he took them with a view to playing them in the latter stages. that went well, didn't it? And it's like he's done exactly the same this time. But we saw it with Bobby Robson when he lost Brian Robson in '86. He was devoid of what he could do with his midfield until the injuries and the lack of form of other players, where he had the guts to shove Peter Beardsley in. And this is Anthony Gordon's Peter Beardsley moment. But unfortunately, the manager hasn't got the nous to see it. That's the sad thing. This is England all over. I mean, even in 1990, the bad start, which suddenly came good with a goal that came from David Platt with only seconds to go against the Belgians, and then all of a sudden we were ignited, in terms of our competition. But England are there. England's form's often the form of Newcastle United. In my lifetime, anyway, I've always felt as though I had like a double kick in the teeth. Newcastle would take you down, and then England would take you so far and let you down, or you went into a tournament more in hope than expectation, or you went into a season more with hope than expectation, and so it is. And under Southgate, I think his time's up. His days are numbered almost certainly. He looks like a man who wants it. Unfortunately for him, when he leaves, his stock is now going to be so low that you're gonna look and say, well, who's going to take you in the Premier League? Is there a club in the Premier League that is currently now sitting going, you know what, Southgate's going to leave England, we'll keep an eye on him. The only idiot who seems to be involved in anything that way, shape or form seems to be Ratcliffe, and you know what, the rest of the country would be willing him on if he took
please
on, because quite
yes,
please.
Exactly.
I mean, it's
Stevie,
shocking.
the thing is, I mean, you could technically stop up with 38-0 draws, like. You could, but then you've got your profit and sustainability that would take 4 points off you, and you'd end up with 34 and get relegated.
All right, we're halfway through the show. As always, still plenty to talk about in the next hour and plenty to get through. We're going to have a quick ad break. We'll be back after these.
Are you looking for healthier, fuller hair? Do you want extra money for bills, trips, extracurricular activities for your kids, or do you want to replace your entire income? Monat is the answer. Our products are Leaping Bunny certified, vegan, and Monat can be used by anyone, including your kids and pets. Message me on my Instagram to partner with me. Founder shares are available, and as a market partner, you have access to uncapped bonuses, 45% commission, 35 to 55% off discounts, on top of all-inclusive paid trips. Right now, I also have a free gift for anyone that partners with me, so don't miss out. You can message me on my Instagram at LizChilvers87.
A big thanks to all our sponsors. Skips and Bins. You can find their website at skipsandbins.com. Contact us, www.skipsandbins.com/contact. Say hello to low-cost waste disposal with pay-as-you-go and contract waste management. A big thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. Their website, mrvickies.co.uk. Email info@mrvickies.co.uk. Telephone 01768 210 102. Thanks to United Group Travel. They are the Travel and Tourism Award winners in 2024. Their website, www.unitedgrouptravel.com. Email beverly.ugtl@gmail.com or telephone 01670 632 460 or mobile 0791 666 4174. Just £30 per person deposit. There are no strangers on our tours, just friends you haven't met yet. A big thanks to Media Arts. You can find them at www.media-arts.co.uk. And don't forget, we are a podcast. You can find us on iTunes or Spotify or other podcast providers. If you want to help the channel grow, then hit the like button, the little thumb underneath the video, click share and share to your social media, or join the channel for as little as $1.99 a month. If you want to take out a one-off payment membership, go to nufcmatters.com and hit membership. And for a £25 fee, you get a scarf, a cup, a pen, and a membership card. You can also put a smartphone over the top of this QR code. It'll take you straight there. And don't forget, we also help the food bank on this channel. nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk is a website where you can make a virtual donation today. And don't forget, end of season due, 20th of July. Tickets at tenner from nufcmatters.com or newcastlelegends.com. Super Matt and Gibbo and George on stage, and the Longsands doing a little acoustic set as well at the Tyneside Irish Centre. All proceeds going to Dementia Matters. There's going to be Bev Reed's going to be there from the charity as well, and a couple of surprise guests are going to turn up as well to support it. So all proceeds going to the charity for that night. And Gibbo and Rob Lee, 2nd of August, are going to be at Gateshead Leisure Centre, Alexandra Road in Gateshead. Tickets are £30, and you can get your tickets from Gateshead Leisure Centre's website now, gatesheadleisurecentre.co.uk. And a little shout out for Danny Mitchell's event, which is the 12th of July at the Crown Plaza. It's an evening with Martin Johnson, CBE, and it's the 21st anniversary of the Rugby World Cup win. 3-course meal and coffee. If you want tickets for that, contact Danny on 07817 412 524. Good luck with that, Danny. Should be a cracking event, that. All right. As always, we get through quite a bit on the show. That's why we do 2 hours on this one. If you've got any questions, don't forget to get them in. And we like to play this music on a Friday as well. The day I met, where we asked you to send in photographs of you meeting somebody from Newcastle United, past or present. Steve wasn't on the show last week, but Steve, I'm not sure whether you saw the start of last week's show. We had an array of Newcastle players sending photos meeting you.
I did see it. Very amusing.
It was a different way of doing it. But Steve, you did send us these in. I put them all together. This is the day you met Lee Clark, John Beresford, Terry McDermott, and the late great Pavel Cernacek. Brilliant stuff, mate. And which child of yours is in your hands?
That's one. That's Rebecca, whose flat I'm staying at the moment. Believe it or not, we used to go down. She loved it. You know, she loved it. I kept telling her she loves going down there to watch the players.
Fantastic. Well, we've got them. Thanks for sharing them, Steve. We have got somebody else who sent in. Don't forget, go to the Facebook group or Facebook page, join the group or like the page, NUFC Matters. Just search for that. Stick them on there or send them to me on X at Steve Wraith. Like Debbie did. She went, "Hi, guys. Just sending some day we met photos. We do like to keep it in the family. Here's my dad with Keegan, my brother, who won the match ball with Keegan and a brewery rep. And me, Debbie, with Gaza and David Howells. I'm on Gaza's left. Then my husband, Kevin, at a party at our house with Tino." So you've got the script there. Here's the photographs. Fantastic. Love that, mind. Love that one. Brilliant stuff. That's the one, of course, that we saw on the message. Gaza there, looking certainly in the early part of his career. And
That's great.
The house party with Tino.
Because I can't see his hands.
Tino never changes, does he? Never changes. Always looks shocked in photos if he's being caught out. Great stuff, Debbie. Thank you for sharing them. Sorry it's taken a couple of weeks to get them on, but if you've got photos with you, with anybody from the club, past or present, send them to us. We'll give them an airing on a Friday night. Sean's flipped the question that we put about Eddie Howe at the start of the show on its head, and I don't mind going back through this because it's a completely different view of what could happen next season. He says, Just say we've got a disaster of an opening 5 games. Do you think PIF would push the button fast on Eddie George?
I've already said it. I think if we're not doing something by Christmas, he'll be under pressure.
Yeah. Do you think they would? Do you think they would give him till the end of the season, or do you think they would make that kind of Chelsea-esque move and sack him halfway through the season?
No, I don't know. No, I don't, because their whole point of getting involved with Newcastle United is to be a top club.
Yeah.
Not just in England, but in Europe, and possibly challenging for world club championships. We're not going to do that if, in the situation we're in, we get to Christmas and it doesn't look like we're even going to be in the top 4. If it was that situation, I think he would be under real pressure. I'd be amazed if he wasn't. This is a takeover I've been absolutely delighted about and revelled in, but I'm under no illusion that the people that have done it are used to being fairly hard-headed. And I've expressed my experience in the marine world with the same people that I've seen, simply because somebody tried to save a few bob on doorknobs and things like that on ships, them getting up and walking out and leaving the whole bloody thing for people to sell that on afterwards. So, if they want to be first, they'll want to be first, and they won't be shy in letting Eddie know.
Yeah, I mean, do you think they would pull the trigger, if you like, Ian, if he got off to a bad start, or do you think he's earned enough brownie points to earn a chance to stay at the end of the season and get things right?
Look, I think 5 games would be extremely premature. But having said that, who knows? Because you've got to look at the 5 games that we've got, particularly like Southampton and Tottenham at home. If we can't beat Tottenham at home, we're the bogey team when it comes to them playing up here. There's no doubt about that. So, I always there's a mate of mine who lives in London. He manages a particular hostelry which I'm acquainted with, and he's a Tottenham fan. I always bring him up for the Newcastle versus Tottenham game. He's never let me down so far.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Mitch, you're based out in the Middle East. You've often talked about that they want to be top and they want to do this, they want to do that, they aim to be first, and that's what Yasser Al Rumayyan said. But should be falter next season, would they make that decision? Would they make that decision easy for them?
Take you back to what I said earlier. He doesn't have anywhere to head.
No, he doesn't. No.
And it wouldn't surprise me if it was a proper disastrous start, like 1 point out of 5 games, and we don't look like we're doing anything. Because again, we can't look back. We can't blame anything on Ashley now. There's no way for anybody to hide. And so if it's not happening on the pitch, nothing would surprise me.
Mm-hmm. Same for you, Steve.
Definitely. I mean, that is exactly the point that I was getting at when I probably didn't put it over as succinctly as I should have. But I think what you've got at Newcastle now, after the honeymoon period of the last 2 seasons, the honeymoon period for the board as well, by the way, not just for Eddie Howe and not just for the players, the majority of which are players within the squad that were inherited back from Steve Bruce, who inherited them from Rafa Benitez in many cases. There's a new regime, if you like. There's a new found air of professionalism is being touted coming out of Newcastle at the moment. After the review that they had in the end of the season, we've seen a new COO come in, Chief Operating Officer, who's come from one of the airports. I don't think he's the sort of guy who's come in and is just going to sit back and expect to, how do you put it, watch people around him tread water. I think he's the sort of bloke who will, even though he's working for Darren Eales, will be very much on Darren Eales' toes, not as much as Darren Eales will be on his, because I think that's the way that the business operates. These guys aren't shy. These guys will cut each other's throats if they have to, if it means that it protects their job and it moves the company forward, or if they feel as though they're moving the company forward. So I think within the boardroom, it's no longer an old pals room. I think there's people there now are going to have to justify their existence. They're going to have to justify their salary, and justify the progress that the football club is making or not making, whichever way it may be. So I think we're going to see a different Newcastle United off the field, and I think that Eddie Howe will be a victim of that if he's not producing on the field, because, like I said earlier, it's his third season, and he's very much got to get it right. He's got to start producing regular, sustained games of football that bring the 3 points. He can't use the excuse of injuries. He can't use the excuse of bad refereeing. He can't use the excuse of exhaustion or midweek fixtures catching up with them, or poor travelling, or all of the sort of things that a manager would use if results weren't going his way. He's in with the big boys. He's getting paid to be a big boy, and I think that there'll be a point where if it's not happening, they will strike, and they will strike very quickly.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay, just want to say thanks to everybody tuning in tonight. We've got 930 watching, 550 on YouTube, and the rest of you are watching on either Facebook, LinkedIn, or X. If you don't mind, open another window on your computer and search NUFC Matters on YouTube, and just hit the subscribe button. It does us a big favour, helps our community grow. We're actually 135 away from hitting the actual attendance of St James's Park with subscribers. So that's a big thank you to everybody, as always, for your support. Benny, he says, the Premier League has reportedly emailed all of its member clubs to reiterate the punishment for fraudulent player transfers during the transfer window. Unless it's an obscene figure, he says, prove it. And Neil Calvert says, topic for tonight, EPL corruption. PSR, joke. Letters from Premier League today about dodgy transfer deals. Man United lowballing Everton for Branthwaite because they know they need the money. And I mean, this came out on social media today, George. It was, in fact, no, it was last night. There was an article which I think is going to come out in the Sunday Telegraph, I think it is, over the weekend, about this letter. And it's almost like the cartel again trying to close off another avenue, and for the clubs who want to break into the top six.
Well, I'd like to know who the author of the letter is, and how many of the clubs in the Premier League had anything to say about it going out. And I suspect there's probably only 6 have had something to do with it and made sure it went out, because it's in their interest again, isn't it? It's making sure that those that have got keep, and those that haven't got don't get. It's as simple as that. It's back to the situation with the cartel running the whole thing, and it just smacks of hate to use the word, but it smacks of corrupt practices in terms of business. I'm really amazed that somebody isn't pressing the button on competition law at the moment. It's going to come, surely, because this is another example of. I'd like to see the emails between the Big Six and Premier League before this letter actually was published. See who talked about it. See who got the chance to talk about it. I suspect if somebody gets hold of those emails, there would be some very interesting links, I think. So it's just another example of the ones that's got keeping, and the ones that haven't got not getting their hands on it, and something needs to be done about it. As I say, it's corrupt in every way I can think of, anyway.
Ian, we're going to learn more, aren't we? We're going to learn more, Ian, from this over the weekend. But it just looks like another way of trying to stop any team getting into that top six.
The one that sticks out to me is Chelsea, and Chelsea broke what was now regarded as the financial fair play regulations by, on average, £100 million a year for 10 years in a row under Abramovich. And they haven't had anything in what you'd call a real punishment for any of that. possibly there is still some sort of semblance of an investigation. But how long are these investigations meant to take? It's just completely and utterly ridiculous because the Premier League, it seems to me, feel as though they're having to investigate the wrong teams. And then when it does come to them being able to investigate the right teams, in other words, not a top 6 side, they seem to get on with it with alacrity. But it's just totally wrong. And I'm afraid to say that it really does look like there are a number of clubs which seem to have a hold of the chief executive of the Premier League's short and curlies, and they're twisting them,
Yeah, Mitch, it's another interesting twist, isn't it, from the Premier League, and sending out another email to clubs reminding them of this new structure that they're trying to
asking the wrong questions, because the questions people should be asking, including the Premier League, are these rules fit for purpose if teams are having to do crazy round the houses 3-team swap deals to navigate the rules, while Chelsea sell a hotel to themselves, while, again, all the stuff I mentioned earlier today, that seems to go unnoticed. Again, Alan asks a very, very, very astute question. Who decides what a fair market value for a player is? Are they going to plug in a big super-powered version of Football Manager and see what that says?
VAR.
How are you going to pull this out to say what a fair valuation of someone is? Man United have just lowballed Everton for Branthwaite. Though, mind you, I think they're going to lowball everybody for everything, because that seems to be Wurzel Gummage's MO, really, isn't it? Just to lowball everyone and hope that it works, and bully them through his client media to give in and make them look hard done by, and the good guys and everybody else the bad guys. I think there's a lot going on here that I think clubs would fight back at, because what they'd be saying is, if this wasn't such a nonsense, we wouldn't have to try and do this. The trouble with multi-club, multiplayer deals is that was effectively the foundation of what Juventus did to get themselves relegated and strip the league titles, because they didn't just bend every rule, they turned every rule into an infinity loop and just drove a cart and horses through it all, and got away with it for years. And then when the hammer did come down, it just all unravelled. And I think that's why I would love to see us stay away from all of these rules, because within these complicated transfer dealings, there's an inherent suspicion within the world of football that people are up to no good. And it gives the Premier League an excuse to say that. Whereas what they should be saying is, are our rules actually up to the job here now? And we all know they're not. Even if you just wanted to let them take into account inflation and standing still, the number wouldn't be 105, it would be 220 or something like that. And it's a totally different ball game. Nobody's asking those questions. Why? Because that's inconvenient for the so-called Big Six. Very inconvenient for them. They can just go about their business, it seems, at the minute, where it's carrying, in some cases, nearly $1 billion or more than $1 billion in debt. Nobody asks about debt. And yet, how can you have a club who, if their new owner takes over, they will essentially be debt-free, having to sell their best young player for 100-odd million to balance books, when that player's going to a club carrying 900 million worth of debt? It's a nonsense. It's an absolute nonsense. It's not about sustainability. It's about the haves keeping it and the have-nots being not allowed to get it. And that, I think, is the absolute disgrace that is the situation they've allowed football to become now. Football is, we've talked about football finance, certainly me and Steve, for years now. And there's times we've just sat and looked at each other and thought, well, if we ran a business like this, like a normal business, we'd be screwed in 18 months. And nobody would give a monkeys. They'd just look at you and say, well, it's your fault. What were you doing? You were running your wages to turnover at more than 75%. You're only ever going to close your business doing that. And we were being told by some people, well, this is a wages to turnover 82%, and that's not bad. And you're thinking, not bad. It just beggars belief that the conversation we're having isn't the conversation we should be having, because somebody somewhere wants to decide what a transfer is worth, wants to decide what a sponsorship's worth. They've got no way of deciding what a sponsorship's worth as a company in the Middle East. The Salah shirt front sponsorship could have been double of what we've had, because I suspect it has earned Salah a lot of cachet in the Middle East of late, and they've probably made a hell of a lot more than 25 million out of it.
Yeah, I mean, Mitch. I mean, what do you think in terms of inflating the player market, in terms of the role of agents? Because I mean, when it comes to, we've had this big debate in Parliament in the last 4 or 5 years about the fan-led review and football regulator, etc. But nobody seems to talk about agents and the influence that they have had on inflating the market for players.
And not just that, and making money disappear out of the game.
Yes, yeah.
When you everybody seems to think this sort of rose-tinted glasses concept that the football pyramid, if the big clubs are spending, it automatically rolls downhill and rolls into the lower clubs. No, it doesn't. That hasn't happened for years.
No.
Now, essentially, that's why you've got the Premier League and the Football League falling out over deals for the Premier League to give the Football League some money for their clubs. And as Steve and I discussed today, we've got potential problems with television deals on the horizon, which we might come to later on. And all of this hinders the smaller clubs. It's why what goes on in the below the Premier League is frankly a disaster. At one point last season, 11 Championship clubs, 11, including 3 of the top 4, I believe, were on a Football League transfer embargo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because of their finances. That's a nonsense. Absolute nonsense. How much influence do agents have? Well, I see the other side of it. Agents aren't doing their job if they're not getting the best deal for their players. And sadly, you've just got to listen to some of the recent stories, the Peter Ridsdale stories. Seth Johnston's agent going in saying, right, we're going to try and double your salary. And the guy opened, I think he was on 8,000 at Derby. They were aiming to get him to 15. And Ridsdale opened the bidding with, it's 28,000, not a penny more. And they got him up, I think, to 32. And Johnson was having to sit on his hands in the meeting, and that still happens. All of that nonsense is still going on. Some of those agents are making a very nice life for themselves over here. There's one of them in particular has just opened a very plush bar with a music studio and a podcast studio and a barbers and gents grooming parlour in it. And you should see what he's selling tables for European Championship games at. And those tables are being sold. Mm-hmm. Such as the ridiculousness out here of particularly the Eastern European money coming into this part of the region at the minute. And you talk to them and they're very open about it. They'll dress it up that they want the very best for their player. But what they'll not talk about is what they're taking out of the game. No. And if you want a reflection of that, one of the overlap interviews, the American footballer who is part owner at Barnsley, mm-hmm. and if you listen to his reaction when they talk about agents' fees here, it blew his mind. Yeah. Because the agents' practices in the NFL are very strictly regulated. They can take no more, I think, than something like 4.5%. And even that is in an exceptional circumstances. And he was like, the agents' game here is like the Wild West. Yeah. I can't believe it. I cannot believe what we're having to shell out that we could be investing in the team in the ground, in the facilities, etc., 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 and it just disappears, and we don't know where it's going. Steve will tell you better than I what we were on the edge of with Chekhtiote's family, and when we had to deal with Obafemi Martins after he left an apartment in Gateshead in a right 2 and 8, and the landlord was getting ready to raise holy hell with Newcastle United. Where was the agent then? Disappeared with his little bundle of cash, that's for sure. And it's wrong. It's because there is no regulation thereof, and the money just disappears. And I think the Premier League, in making teams state what they've spent on agents' fees, what they're trying to do is shame people into submission. These people have no shame.
No.
They do not give a fuck. Not a single one. They used to have a big field of fucks, and it's now barren because they've given them all away, and they ain't growing anymore. And that's the state of play with it.
Right.
What's your thoughts, Steve? Potentially more new rules coming in. We'll find out more over the weekend.
We will. What's interesting with this one is that the Premier League are saying that the clubs have breached what they see not as the letter of the law, but what hangs around the law. You know, it's the spirit of the game, the spirit of the law that they're now claiming is being broken. Well, what's that? What does that mean? Oh, well, we didn't expect you to do that. So now that you've done it, we're going to penalise you. Well, is there a rule that says I can't do it? No, but it's against the spirit of the game. I mean, what the Premier League fail to understand is all of a sudden they're up against lawyers, top class lawyers who work for organisations that employ dozens and dozens of lawyers to find ways through the law, to break down and find all the pathways. That's that job. You see it, for example, in the oil industry, where they'll have a team of 150, 200 lawyers who are there to drive a coach and horses through all the little gaps, all the little, whenever a new law comes out, a new rule, then they'll find a way through it. And that's what's happening with now the Premier League. It's like a cartel, if you like, in terms of the way that they try to operate and the way that they're you don't remember they're supposed to be operating for the 20 members, but what they seem to have forgotten is it's only the 20 when it suits them. And is it the spirit of the game? Does the spirit of the game win your trophies? No, it doesn't. You can be as nice as you want, but it's not going to win the cup for you by being nice and smiley. And now the likes of Masters and that, they've suddenly realised that we're up against stuff here that we've never ever experienced, and now we're backing off. Now we've got to close that loophole and close that. They might call them a loophole, or they might be the spirit of the game, but it's because clubs like West Ham, like Aston Villa and Wolves and Everton and such like, they're now being forced to find these routes because all the other routes are being cut off to them by the cartel. And Mitch is right. We don't want to get caught up in it.
Steve, it's a bit like HMRC writing to somebody and saying, "Oh, you've broken the spirit of the tax code." Yes. And the thing is, the tax code is written. It's legislation. It's law. It's pretty there for accountants know how to use it, and you can use the tax code to get round tax, and that's called avoidance. But if you break the tax code, that's called evasion. And you know what the difference between avoidance and evasion is? About the thickness of a prison cell wall.
Aye. The buy-in.
Or the thickness of the skin of a government minister. And we all know which one we're talking about. You've got people on benefits. You've got people claiming benefits, and they find out that they haven't paid a certain amount of tax yet. Someone can have £4.5 million that he just forgot forgot to mark down on his bit of paper, and then forgot about it for like 10 years, and then all of a sudden goes, oh, it was a mistake, there's the money back. Yeah, just like that. This is what we're up against, though, isn't it? We're up against bureaucracy. We're up against basically the Premier League's out of its depth now. The Premier League out of their depth because they're getting the run around all over the place, and when it suits them, the only recourse is to keep the kind of status quo that's there, keep the people happy at the very top, keep the Arsenals, keep the Man Uniteds, the Liverpools, those clubs happy at the top, because they are the ones that the certain clubs at the top who are most at risk of everything tumbling around them if a Villa breaks in, if a Newcastle breaks in. So they are the ones that are panicking. Man City aren't panicking at all. In fact, Man City are happy to take the Premier League to court at will, and as we've already seen. Villa will threaten it. Whether they do it or not is a different matter. But the other aspect is that the Premier League had every opportunity to do something about the money that was leaking out the game with the agents. And they cobbled together some sort of ridiculous plan, and it got thrown out. The agents would have nothing to do with it. The players don't want anything to do with that anyway, because it's the agents are working on the players' behalf. I'm sure you would end up with a fight with the PFA if you started involving yourself as well. So everybody would say there are good agents and there are bad agents. It depends on whether you're the one who's making the money or the one who's losing the money. The clubs will say that that's bad agents because it's costing them.
I must be getting old though, but you see, we used to think players were well off, back in the sort of late 60s, early 70s, but they were getting paid about sort of 5 times as much as the average worker. Now they're getting paid 10 times as much as the average worker every week. And it's just gone from it's just gone from sort of, the ridiculous to absolutely outrageously, galactically ridiculous. And look, I don't mind players making a fortune, but the thing is, the players would probably readily admit they don't need as much as they got, but they're being driven by their agents who are on a cut. And the thing is, it's like a seller's market from that perspective. It's a continuing seller's market from players, selling their wares to the clubs, and it just got out of hand. And I'm afraid to say that as much as there was some good stuff in the fan-led review publication that was done by Tracy Crouch and others, particularly the football regulator, the government, outgoing government, sat on it for far too long, and that should have been legislation now, and this should have been getting dealt with. And I'm honestly not trying to be overtly political, but there was no reason for them to sit on it as long as they did. I just think they'd been nobbled. I think they had been nobbled.
Absolutely, Ian. Yeah.
You've got the other problem as well. Though. Go on. I was going to say you've got the other problem as well, Ian. That when it comes to an agent deals with a football club, and the football club's happy with their lot, and then he deals with another football club. So basically, the clubs aren't going to, until you get a situation where they all work together. There's always, because it's the sheer nature of football clubs, that if they think for example, they can get Mbappe tomorrow, but they're going to cost the agent so much, and they find out that another club in there is not willing to, and they'll get the jump on them. They'll take Mbappe and they'll pay the money. They'll quibble and they'll complain and they'll moan about it, but at the end of the day, they wanted the player, so they've got the player that they wanted, because they're in a competition with the other 19 clubs in that particular league or whatever it is. So it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. We're never ever going to get the situation where the clubs are going to vote to penalise the agents, because they know that there will always be one or two that'll stifle it and say no, and it's because they have got somebody lined up, and it's a ridiculous state of affairs. But the other problem you would have, though, I mean, if if, for example, the regulator came in and blocked agents or blocked the fees to agents, would that have an impact? Because I don't know enough about the legislation that was written and whether or not that would be classed as government interference in football. And then you get into a totally different ball game where you have, they might say it's an independent regulator, but if the regulator is appointed by the government in the first place, does that throw us up against FIFA? Because FIFA would immediately look at it. We've seen them do it with African countries in the past, in African countries being chucked out because they've said that it's the government that's chosen the head of the FA, and all of that type of thing. So again, it's all well and good, but unless you've got the top lawyers who have written the legislation in the first place and taken everything into account, there'll always be another lawyer who'll come in and drive a coach and horses through it.
Yeah. Challenges as well. You'd need world football to work together to clamp down on it all. Because sure as eggs is eggs, you stop the agents getting involved in the Premier League, player trading will just drift elsewhere.
And you walk in with the most corrupt organisation in the world, which is FIFA.
Yeah. And great stuff tonight. Plenty of topics covered. We've got to squeeze in tweet of the week. Sorry, George, you and Steve have both got very, very, very small delays, so that's why you're not quite getting in with your points. So go on, quickly make a point, George, before I do the tweet of the week.
Well, I want to go back to the point I've made before when people start talking about independent anything from the government. I've worked with the Independent Inspector of Prisons, the Independent Inspector of Probation, the Independent Inspector of Police. And the one thing I learned very quickly was the Home Secretary writes them a set of rules, and that's what they get to. That's as independent as they get. As if they don't, the Home Secretary bloody sacks them.
Yeah. There we go. Point made. Mark Byers seems to be really keen on talking politics, so the first few tweets are for you, Mark. That's who I'm voting for. Greg's. It's circulated quite a bit.
You know,
what's that, Steve?
I know. I'm just waiting for next week because Greg, you know what Mark's like? He's going to send a photograph of the day I met, and it's going to be Sir John Holland for Raj.
Politicians compensate for the lack of clarity in what you're saying by interjecting phrases like, let me be clear, I've always been clear, and I couldn't be clearer, between every incoherent, rambling line sentence you deliver to the public. You kind of beat a Viz letter, can you, just to sum up the mood of the general public. And there's been a slight change at number 10. Not quite Labour getting in yet. It's
10 to 1.
It's the number. It's 10 to 1, yes. And thanks to the numerous people who sent us this one. Once elected, I will be vegetarian, says the fox, to a herd of sheep. Firm but fair. Pub Fiction Live. I love this. Jack Carroll. I don't know if I'm watching England or Soccer Aid, he said, as he was watching England play out another turgid game during the week. And I did like this one as well. Adam Stout said, I genuinely and sincerely would like to thank Gareth Southgate for his efforts as England manager and the players themselves. My grandma has been bedbound since 1973, and she's just got up to turn the TV off. Thanks to this. Brilliant stuff. Gary Scott found another Facebook. It's absolutely Rose Ting. She's had a few inboxes this week. And maybe this box, lads, wouldn't be as heavy if they just used their arms. Jimmy Moore, thanks for all your submissions this week. Some I can use, some I can't. Before we work on artificial intelligence, why don't we do something about natural stupidity? That's a good. That's another good sign from the US of A. Look very carefully at this picture, lads, and please tell me you saw the same thing I did.
Oh my God!
Nothing wrong with your eyesight. And this lady says, if I'm so dumb, how did I finish a jigsaw puzzle in 6 to 7 weeks when the box said 7 to 8 years?
Oh dear.
Classic, absolute classic. This one as well. Do you really have to post everything we eat on Instagram?
Oh,
that is where it's getting, to be honest. And another one from Viz. Why do cat food manufacturers bother making flavors like shrimp and beef or duck and chicken? All of my cat wants to do is lick his backside. Cat backside flavored cat food. That's a winner. Well said, George. And another one. We seem to be we've had a lot sent in from Viz this week. This one, it's the best thing since sliced bread. It's a sliced shed. Separated into manageable 3 slices for storing away in the winter or when it rains. What a great idea. That'll be somebody out there thinking that's a genuine advert, I would imagine. And
I think a dehydrated shed would be a good one where you just add water.
Yeah, it's another good suggestion. Photo shoot at Manchester United a while back. Gary Neville, Eric Cantona and David Beckham delivering Wayne Rooney's signing on bonus in 2004.
Oh, dear.
And Jack the Ripper from the distant past has now been found. Jack the Ripper apparently was Blakey off on the buses. Another classic from Viz. There's loads of slugs all over the lawn, says this man. Get some salt, says his missus. Bloody hell, Susan, you'll eat anything. And this could have gone into the lookalikes section, but I've decided to leave it for tweet of the week. I think I need a coffee. I thought this was Bert from Sesame Street. Excellent. And my fat ass thought she was holding a sandwich. It's actually a boot, but it does actually look like a sandwich. And this is why these toys matter, lads.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Definitely an IKEA photo of that.
And you're picking an England formation, you want the square pegs to go in the square holes.
Correct. Karen posted this as well. Somebody actually put this on a page. Free to a good home, border collie, not house trained, poor with children, and quite frankly, a vicious little bastard. It's actually a badger, of course. And great photo of this. Happiest day of my life. That's me in the background. And found a plumber that works around the clock.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Coming to the last few. I would do anything for love.
Aye.
Please support Sunderland, but I won't do that, says Meatloaf. And last night I had a horrifying dream that disco was actually making a comeback. At first I was afraid. I was petrified.
Yeah.
Very good, Jimmy. Another one which needs your attention, lad.
Jimmy.
One of the best pleasures in life, lads, is to read a book in total silence.
Oh.
Yeah. And thanks for the Star Trek one, Dougie. My ex-boyfriend was a clown. Looks like I have some pretty big shoes to fill.
Oh, dear me.
Captain Kirk. And for the last time, you need to call a doctor for that. No, rectile. I've got a rectile problem.
Oh, dear me.
Thanks, Jimmy. And did everyone pick up some yoga pants? Thanks, Ray, for this one.
Brilliant.
Of course, yoga pants. And I got a package today with bullets and a note in Arabic. Idiot. These are suppositories and a prescription from the doctor.
Oh, God.
Last couple, I promise.
Oh, please stop. Please
Portaloo, couldn't escape if I wanted to. I'll sing it, Gary, for you. Portaloo, couldn't escape if I wanted to. Abaloo.
Oh, dear me.
And dear clients, if you're on the phone while I'm giving you a haircut, this will be your new look. That's a genuine sign in a barber's. Brilliant. Top 4. Local man addicted to brake fluid says he can stop anytime he wants.
Ta-da.
And one from, this is what Ian was talking about earlier on. There's only one way we're going. Down. That's number 3.
Brilliant.
Number 2 is this one. Don't go breaking my heart. I couldn't if I tried.
Oh.
Thank you, Tango Oscar November. And the winner this week by a country mile. I told you to bring a couple of ribeyes home for dinner.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thank you for that. I love that one. Brilliant stuff. If you've got any tweets, send them to me at X, at Steve Rafe, or go to Facebook group, join it, go to the Facebook page, like it, and stick them on there, and we will pick them up and show them next week.
I'm saying you used to tell me off on me dad jokes, Steve.
I did, yeah. Well, it's been replaced by singing, Ian. We've missed you. You'll have to get back with some dad jokes the next time we get you on. Where we'll go? Well, Steve Middlemiss asked a good question earlier on. It's a good one to finish on tonight, lads. Depending on signings, do you think there'll be a change of the way we play system-wise, George? Do you think he'll change it? I'm going to add a little question of my own into there, so it's two-barreled. If Trippier leaves, which we expect him to, who would you give the captaincy to? So do you think there'll be a change of playing formation by Eddie, or do you think it'll stick with one up front? And who do you think you'll give the captaincy to, George, if Trippier leaves?
It could depend on who comes into the club as to how he plays. But I don't see him changing it. He's got a formula that seems to work when it gets it right. And it's sometimes spectacular. I mean, we've seen some great games this year, even this year when it hasn't been brilliant. We've seen some really good games, some clever stuff. I mean, we had a game towards the end of the season. We only had 28% possession, and we made the opposition look like, started with Spurs, I think, looked like non-starters, which we just made them look ordinary, and we only had 28% possession. But that relied on the way we played, very much on the way we played. No, I don't see him changing anything dramatically. What changes there might depend on what player he's got at his disposal. And but no, I don't see that changing very much at all. What was the other bit, Steve? You tied in?
Who would you give the captaincy to?
Oh, I think if Trippier goes, it's got to be Bruno for me. I think I would risk Bruno, and yeah, Bruno. That he's the talisman. He's there's everything about him that everybody else wants to be, and that's a good reason to have a captain. And the word discipline there. He couldn't have been more disciplined towards the end of the season when he avoided that dreadful number 5 yellow card. Or was it number 10 yellow card? Number 5 yellow card. Number 10. For him to do that says that he's listening to somebody, and that's not a bad thing for somebody that's a captain as well. If it isn't Bruno, I'm not sure who I would give it to, but yeah, Bruno for me. I'm not going to go further than that.
All right, Ian, would you change the formation next season, do you think? And who would you give the captaincy to?
I think you pick your formation horses for courses. You know who you're playing. I think I don't think Newcastle play the same exact formation every game. They have a pattern, but I think they do try and change things depending on who they're playing. I have to say, I in my head, Fabian Schär. I would make Fabian Schär the captain.
Yeah, it's not a bad call.
Interesting. Dean Young on YouTube has put Bruno for captain as well. Mitch, formation-wise and captain next season?
Formation-wise, I don't think I think he'll start from the same position. I think what you might find is that he's developed a few more, or at least what I hope to find is developed a few more alternatives for when that system isn't working. We haven't always looked great at we can switch personnel, but it doesn't necessarily switch the style or the formation. In terms of captain, there very much seems to still be a leadership group situation where Jamal Lascelles will continue to be club captain.
Yeah.
And I think he's earned that, to be fair. However, who carries the armband on the pitch, I'm not convinced it matters too much. Because I do think we've got leaders in many different parts of the pitch. And really, the armband is almost just decoration and ticks a box for who can speak to the ref or not. Would Bruno carry the armband well? Yeah, I think he would. I think he'd wear it with pride. He's talking about wanting to emulate Shearer. Well, how else would you emulate Shearer in ways he hasn't yet? Stick the armband on. And I've noticed his English has improved to the point where he could communicate very well with referees and pass that around the rest of the team. And so I think going forward, I think the lad would burst with pride with the armband on him. But I really don't think it matters too much to me, because it's obvious we've got a leadership group still, and whoever's on the pitch, we've got leaders in various places, and that's what matters more.
Okay, Steve, thoughts?
Bruno's matured an awful lot in the last sort of half of the season. What he also seems to have done is that, as Mitch says, his English has come on a ton, but I think that his all-round game benefited from the fact that he was hauled in because of his discipline, because he did have a disciplinary problem in terms of the bookings, the time of his bookings, but he's also turned into one of the most vocal players that we have in the team. And if you're going to be a captain, you've got to be vocal. You've got to be able to shout at your own players as much as you've got to communicate with a referee. You've got to be able to lead by example. And I think what he did last season towards the back end, since he got the 9th booking, was certainly lead by example. So he would certainly be a contender. I agree absolutely on what you said about Lascelles. I'm hoping that Lascelles comes back fit. I'm hoping that, I don't think he'll be back before Christmas, but I'm hoping he comes back, and I'm hoping that he's becomes a prominent part of the squad again. The same with Botman. Botman seems to be ahead of the game in terms of his injury and his recuperation. And as far as Eddie's concerned, I think what he sometimes struggled to do was to change it when it was going wrong. He was criticised for a long spell of not having a plan B, something that we're now, well, people are now saying that Southgate doesn't even have a plan A, but it's only a different matter. But what I think he will do, I think he'll change it in terms of when, during a game, when he alternates, when he flicks Gordon onto the right and then onto the left, or he channels him down the middle and pulls Isak away, just to cause a little bit of confusion. And I think he'll start to do that more and more. I think you've got to have your solid backbone of midfield. And whether we've got the personnel to adapt to a 3 at the back and 2 wing backs when it suits, I think we did have until the injuries came. And I think he did use that to an effect at times. But whether he would ever go with that as his permanent formation, I'm not too sure. Perhaps the loss of Trippier might encourage him to do that, and he might feel as though going with the 3 and the wing, the two wide men cutting inside and having the wing backs overlap, that may be something that he might bring in certain games. But I think one of the things that you mentioned there was, George, was the fact that he was able to alternate, and he was able to adapt and keep the fans on board with only 27% possession. Because when we did have the ball, we were dynamic, we were forceful, we were resolute, we were attack-minded, and we were getting results in terms of goals. And I don't think there's a team in the league, probably other than Liverpool at times, that when they go on a charge like that, really do get your bum out the seat and you're watching. Other teams that normally played like that now play flat football. Man United for 2 seasons have played totally flat football. Chelsea, they dabble with trying to play the ball around at the back and pushing it through midfield. I think us and Liverpool were the 2 teams that sort of went away from Guardiola and his ticky-tacky football, and that's to the benefit of Eddie Howe, and I suppose it's to the benefit of us if he can push that 27% and still get results into 35-40%, then world's his oyster. But he's got to have the personnel and he's got to have the confidence to be able to do it.
Okay, we've run out of time, and Son of THC has come in late. I want to mention Danny first of all. Good to see you, Danny. Nice to see Ian on the show. A lot of brilliant early memories following the lads on his and Dave's buses back in the day. Cheers, lads. Great show. Thank you, Danny. But yeah, Son of THC We might have to carry this on. We might have to carry this on tomorrow. But he says, Steve, remember what I told you about Saudi Arabia over a year or two ago about the petrodollar and how it could lead to sanctions as a Saudi? That time is upon us. The petrodollar contract has ended last month, and now America's starting to put Saudi in the frame for 9/11. Politics is at play. I think you're going to find out. I was right when I warned you of this. Obama treatment could be on the horizon. Listen, lads, that's half an hour in itself. I guess we can probably talk about it in depth tomorrow. But in a nutshell, I'm going to come to the politician or former MP in the room. Ian, thoughts on what Son of THC said?
Well, I think it's entirely possible, but I don't see it. I mean, I think this is hype, particularly in an election year in the United States of America. And I think, you know, there's people looking for ghosts to flap at from the United States of America perspective. I wouldn't be overly concerned about that. There's no doubt about it. United States of America really and Saudi Arabia are big allies. There's no doubt about that. I think it'd be more interesting to see what OPEC's attitude to all that is. And I just one personal thing as well, Steve. A number of people have been asking me on social media, oh, it's all very well you going on here because it's an election week. Just to clarify, I'm not actually standing in this election. I'm retiring from Parliament, so I'm not after anybody's votes.
No, exactly. Yeah. And it was me who got in touch with you, Ian. You didn't do it the other way around. I asked you to come on. We said we'd get you back on because you've had a busy 12 months, and it's been ultimately it's been like a farewell tour for you as well. So you know, looking forward to the retirement, and hopefully frees you up for another, maybe once a month on here, popping on as a guest, a bit like Keith Patterson. It'd be great to have you back on once a month.
It would be a real pleasure, Steve. It would be a real pleasure. Thank you.
Great stuff. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. Ian will have to get his dad jokes sorted for the next time he's on, but we'll play out a little bit. I must get my dyslexia sorted out. I bought a car off eBay last week with no reserve. The thing just won't go backwards.
Oh dear.
Thank you, Elliot. Another good one to finish off the show. Thanks to Steve. Thanks to Mitch. Thanks to Ian. Thanks to George. Thanks to you in the chat. Thanks to all the moderators. Over 980 watching live tonight. Facebook, LinkedIn, X. If you're watching on there,
thank you,
nufc Matters on YouTube, and please subscribe. Professionals is 4 o'clock tomorrow. Me, Mitch, and Stu back together again at 4 o'clock because England obviously plays Sunday. And on Sunday, you'll have Talk of the Tune, which will be 11. It's a pre-record, so you get your taste of NUFC Matters on Sunday morning. But have a good weekend, lads. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers, everybody.
Thanks very much. Cheers.